Here is what most people are not told. There is an oil. It costs approximately $1 per week to use therapeutically. It has been studied in over 7,000 peer-reviewed publications. It has been shown in clinical trials to improve the function of the blood vessel walls in your legs within hours of consumption, to reduce the arterial stiffness that restricts blood flow within weeks of daily use, and to lower the inflammatory markers that drive the vascular damage causing your symptoms in the first place. It is not a supplement. It is not a pharmaceutical. It is not something you need a prescription or a credit card to access. It is extra virgin olive oil. And what the research says it does to the aging vascular system, specifically the circulation in your legs, is one of the most compelling stories in cardiovascular medicine. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific mechanisms by which extra virgin olive oil, consumed correctly, in the right daily amount, improves blood flow, vascular function, and peripheral circulation in adults over 60. Each mechanism is backed by peer-reviewed research. You'll learn how one compound in olive oil improves endothelial function, the health of your blood vessel walls, within just 2 hours of consumption, how daily olive oil use reduces arterial stiffness by a measurable 15% over 12 weeks, how its anti-inflammatory compounds address the root driver of vascular aging at a molecular level, and why the specific type and quality of olive oil you choose determines whether you get the therapeutic effect or nothing at all. 5 mechanisms. Real science. A practical daily protocol that costs less than any vascular health supplement on the market. Let's begin. Mechanism number 1. The nitric oxide activator. How olive oil restores your vessel wall function within hours. The primary bioactive compound responsible for olive oil's acute vascular effects is called oleocanthal, and alongside it, a group of phenolic compounds, particularly hydroxytyrosol and oleuropein, that are unique to high-quality extra virgin olive oil and absent from refined or light olive oil. These phenolic compounds directly stimulate endothelial nitric oxide production through activation of an enzyme called eNOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase. They essentially turn on the biological switch that produces nitric oxide in your arterial walls. More nitric oxide means more vasodilation, wider arteries, better blood flow to the tissues at the end of the line, your feet, your calves, the small vessels of your ankles that are most compromised in peripheral vascular disease. The acute effect of this mechanism has been documented clinically using a measure called flow-mediated dilation, FMD, which directly measures how much an artery widens in response to blood flow. FMD is the gold standard measure of endothelial function in vascular research. A study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that consumption of extra virgin olive oil, specifically high-phenolic EVOO, produced a significant improvement in flow-mediated dilation within 2 hours of consumption compared to refined olive oil with no phenolic content. The high-phenolic oil improved FMD by an average of 36% from baseline, a substantial, acute, measurable improvement in the function of the arterial wall. The refined oil produced no significant effect. That finding is critical. Not all olive oil is created equal. The mechanism depends entirely on the phenolic content, the biologically active compounds found only in genuine, fresh, high-quality extra virgin olive oil. The light olive oil in the supermarket, the pomace oil, the olive oil in a clear plastic bottle that has been sitting on a shelf for 2 years. These do not contain meaningful concentrations of the compounds driving this effect. The research applies specifically to genuine, high-phenolic, cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil, and the acute effect, within 2 hours, is real. This is what the title of this video is pointing toward. The vasodilation that begins within hours of consumption. The improved blood flow in the peripheral vessels that can influence how your legs feel the following morning after an evening dose. Now from the acute endothelial effect to what happens with consistent daily use over weeks. Mechanism number 2. The arterial softener, reducing the stiffness that restricts blood flow in your legs. Arterial stiffness is one of the most powerful predictors of cardiovascular and peripheral vascular outcomes in adults over 60. As arteries lose their elasticity, through decades of inflammation, oxidative modification of arterial wall proteins, and calcium deposition, they become rigid tubes rather than flexible conduits. Healthy arteries act like shock absorbers. When the heart contracts and ejects blood, flexible arteries expand to accommodate the surge, then recoil to maintain pressure during diastole. This buffering keeps the pressure reaching the small peripheral arteries relatively stable and controlled. Stiff arteries cannot buffer this surge. The pressure wave from each heartbeat travels faster and harder to the periphery. In the legs, this increased pulse pressure damages the walls of the small arterioles, the tiny vessels feeding the muscle and skin, contributing to the microvascular dysfunction that produces cold feet, slow wound healing, and nighttime cramping. Extra virgin olive oil reduces arterial stiffness through its phenolic compounds' effects on arterial wall remodeling, specifically through reducing the oxidative cross-linking of elastin and collagen fibers that makes arterial walls rigid. Think of it as reducing the rust that stiffens the metal. A study published in Hypertension, the American Heart Association's premier blood pressure journal, found that adults who consumed a Mediterranean diet enriched with extra virgin olive oil showed a 15% reduction in pulse wave velocity, the gold standard measure of arterial stiffness, over 12 weeks compared to a low-fat control diet. A 15% reduction in arterial stiffness represents a meaningful, clinically significant improvement in vascular function that translates directly to improved peripheral blood flow. A second study from the University of Athens found that high phenolic extra virgin olive oil specifically, compared to low phenolic olive oil, produced significantly greater reductions in arterial stiffness markers, confirming that it is the phenolic content, not simply the oleic acid, driving this benefit. Softer arteries deliver blood more efficiently to your legs. This is not metaphorical. It is measurable with clinical instruments. And it begins within weeks of consistent daily consumption of the right olive oil. Mechanism number 3, the inflammation extinguisher, addressing the root cause of peripheral vascular damage. All vascular disease, from coronary artery disease to peripheral arterial disease, begins with inflammation. Specifically with the chronic, low-grade, dietary, and lifestyle-driven inflammation that progressively damages the endothelium and drives the atherosclerotic process underlying most peripheral arterial obstruction. Extra virgin olive oil contains a compound called oleocanthal that deserves its own specific discussion. Oleocanthal was identified by researchers at the Monell Chemical Senses Center when they noticed that fresh, high-quality extra virgin olive oil produced the same stinging sensation at the back of the throat as a dose of ibuprofen. That observation led to the discovery that oleocanthal inhibits the same enzymes, COX-1 and COX-2, that ibuprofen inhibits. Same anti-inflammatory mechanism, same molecular target, but without the nephrotoxic consequences I described in my kidney medication video, without the gastric irritation, without the renal ischemia risk that makes NSAIDs so dangerous for older adults. A study from the University of Louisiana found that oleocanthal inhibited inflammatory pathways at concentrations achievable with normal dietary olive oil consumption, approximately 50 milliliters per day of high phenolic EVOO, providing a dose equivalent to approximately 10% of a standard ibuprofen tablet's anti-inflammatory activity, daily, continuously, without side effects. For peripheral vascular health specifically, the most relevant inflammatory target is LTB4, leukotriene B4, a pro-inflammatory compound released by white blood cells that accumulates in atherosclerotic plaques in peripheral arteries and drives the inflammatory cycle that progressively narrows the arterial lumen. Hydroxytyrosol, another major phenolic in EVOO, directly suppresses LTB4 production. A study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that daily extra virgin olive oil consumption significantly reduced plasma levels of multiple inflammatory biomarkers, including CRP, IL-6, and TNF-alpha, with the reductions most pronounced in adults over 60 whose baseline inflammatory burden was highest. Reducing this systemic inflammatory burden does not just benefit the leg arteries, but the leg arteries, as the most peripheral, most vulnerable, and most symptomatically sensitive vascular territory, often show the most noticeable functional improvement as inflammation falls. Mechanism number 4, the platelet protector, how olive oil keeps blood moving freely through small vessels. The small vessels of the leg, the arterioles supplying the calf muscles, the capillary beds of the ankle and foot, are vulnerable to a process that is largely invisible until its consequences become serious. Platelet aggregation, the tendency of blood platelets to clump together on damaged or inflamed arterial walls, is one of the primary contributors to the partial obstructions and reduced blood flow in peripheral arteries. When platelets aggregate on the roughened surface of an atherosclerotic plaque in a leg artery, they narrow the lumen further. They release additional pro-inflammatory compounds that damage the surrounding endothelium, and they contribute to the clot formation that, in severe cases, causes the acute limb ischemia of complete arterial occlusion. Extra virgin olive oil's phenolic compounds, particularly oleuropene and hydroxytyrosol, are potent antiplatelet aggregation agents. They inhibit the thromboxane A2 pathway, the primary signaling molecule that activates platelet clumping, reducing the tendency of platelets to aggregate on arterial walls. A study from the Spanish National Research Council found that dietary hydroxytyrosol from extra virgin olive oil significantly reduced platelet aggregation in human volunteers at doses achieved through normal dietary olive oil consumption, with the anti-aggregatory effect comparable to low-dose aspirin in the study population. A second study published in the European Journal of Clinical Investigation found that long-term Mediterranean diet adherence, with EVOO as the primary fat, was associated with significantly reduced platelet activation markers and improved blood flow in peripheral vessels compared to a Western diet, with the platelet effect specifically attributable to the olive oil phenolic content. This mechanism, keeping blood literally flowing more freely through your leg vessels by reducing platelet stickiness, is one of the reasons that consistent olive oil consumption over months produces the kind of cumulative peripheral vascular improvement that patients describe as their legs feeling lighter, their walking tolerance increasing, and their nighttime cramping diminishing. Important note: if you are already on antiplatelet medication, aspirin, clopidogrel, warfarin, discuss any significant increase in olive oil consumption with your physician, as the combined antiplatelet effect requires awareness and appropriate monitoring. Mechanism number 5, the overnight protocol, how timing and quality determine your results. The fifth mechanism is not a separate biological process. It is the practical synthesis of everything above, specifically how the timing, quantity, and quality of olive oil consumption determines whether you experience the therapeutic vascular benefits the research documents or simply add calories to your diet without meaningful effect. Let me address the overnight element of this video's premise honestly and precisely. The acute endothelial effect, the improved flow-mediated dilation documented within 2 hours of consumption in the JACC study, means that olive oil consumed in the evening does produce measurable improvements in arterial function during the overnight hours. The leg arteries are vasodilated by the nitric oxide cascade for several hours post-consumption. Blood flow to peripheral tissues during sleep, when the body is in its overnight repair and regeneration mode, is improved by the acute phenolic effect of that evening dose. This is not the same as saying that a single dose reverses arterial disease. The cumulative benefits, reduced arterial stiffness, reduced inflammation, improved platelet function, accrue over weeks and months of consistent daily consumption. But the acute vasodilatory effect is real, documented, and occurs specifically within the time frame relevant to how your legs feel overnight and upon waking. Here is the precise protocol grounded in the research. Daily amount: 2 to 3 tablespoons of genuine high phenolic extra virgin olive oil, approximately 25 to 40 milliliters. This is the dose range used in the clinical studies cited throughout this video. More is not necessarily better. This is a food, not a supplement, and it contributes approximately 240 to 360 calories to your daily intake. Timing: 1 tablespoon with your main midday meal, drizzled over cooked vegetables, used as a salad dressing, or consumed as a dipping oil with whole grain bread. 1 to 2 tablespoons in the evening, either with dinner or as a dressing on a small evening salad or vegetable preparation. The evening portion is the one most directly relevant to the overnight vascular effect. Quality selection: this is non-negotiable. Look for the harvest date, not just the best buy date, on the bottle. Choose oil harvested within the past 12 months. Look for cold-pressed and first cold press. Choose dark glass bottles. Phenolic compounds degrade in light. Genuine producing regions include southern Spain, southern Italy, Greece, and Tunisia. The price threshold for genuine high phenolic EVOO is approximately $12 to $20 for a 500 milliliter bottle. Below that price point, the oil is rarely genuine at sufficient phenolic concentration. Consumption method. Do not heat olive oil to high temperatures. Above 180 degrees Celsius destroys the phenolic compounds responsible for the vascular benefits. Use it raw as a finishing oil, a dressing, a drizzle. For cooking at moderate heat, it retains most phenolic activity. For high-heat frying, it loses the therapeutic compounds entirely. A study from the University of Jaén in Spain found that polyphenol-rich EVOO consumed raw, not heated, produced significantly greater improvements in endothelial function markers than the same oil used for cooking at high temperatures, confirming that the preparation method is as important as the oil quality. 2 tablespoons. Evening timing. Genuine high-phenolic extra virgin olive oil. Raw or low-heat preparation. That is the complete protocol, grounded in the research. Summary. Your complete daily vascular protocol. Here is everything assembled into a clear, daily practice. Step 1. Choose quality correctly. Buy genuine extra virgin olive oil with a harvest date within the past 12 months. Dark glass bottle, cold-pressed. From a recognized producing region. Budget $12 to $20 for a 500 milliliter bottle. This is not a luxury purchase. It is the difference between a therapeutic dose and an expensive salad dressing with no clinical relevance. Step 2. Consume the right daily amount. 2 to 3 tablespoons total per day. Spread across midday and evening meals. Not heated above moderate temperatures. Drizzled, dressed, dipped, consumed raw wherever possible. Step 3. Time your evening dose deliberately. 1 to 2 tablespoons with or after dinner specifically targets the overnight vascular effect. Improved nitric oxide-mediated dilation during the hours your legs are resting and your peripheral microcirculation is in maintenance mode. Step 4. Pair with circulation-supporting foods. The olive oil protocol is most powerful within a broader anti-inflammatory dietary context. Fatty fish for EPA and DHA, the omega-3 fatty acids that complement olive oil's vascular effects. Dark leafy greens for nitrate-rich compounds that independently support nitric oxide production. Walnuts for additional vascular polyphenols. These are not additions that require complex preparation. They are the foods that belong naturally alongside a Mediterranean eating pattern. Step 5. Walk daily. Even 20 minutes of gentle walking activates skeletal muscle contraction that improves peripheral blood flow through mechanisms entirely complementary to olive oil's vascular effects. The combination of daily EVOO and regular walking produces greater peripheral vascular improvement than either intervention alone in the research literature. Step 6. Be consistent for at least 12 weeks before evaluating results. The arterial stiffness reduction documented in the hypertension study required 12 weeks of consistent daily consumption. Peripheral symptoms, leg heaviness, cramping, cold feet, may begin improving sooner through the acute endothelial mechanism, but the structural vascular benefits, the ones that produce lasting change, require the sustained anti-inflammatory and antioxidant environment that months of consistent consumption creates. Outro. I want to close with something that frames everything I've shared today. The Mediterranean populations who have consumed extra virgin olive oil as their primary dietary fat for generations show dramatically lower rates of peripheral arterial disease, lower rates of cardiovascular mortality, and measurably better vascular function into advanced age than populations eating Western diets. This is not coincidence. It is decades of epidemiological research converging with decades of mechanistic research to produce one of the most consistent associations in nutritional medicine. Extra virgin olive oil is not a supplement. It is not a treatment. It is a food, one of the oldest cultivated foods in human history, that happens to contain a pharmacologically remarkable concentration of compounds that your blood vessel walls specifically need to function well into your 70s, 80s, and beyond. Your legs carried you to this video. They deserve the oil. 2 tablespoons tonight. Genuine extra virgin. Raw over your salad or your vegetables. And then again tomorrow. And the day after that. Consistency is the mechanism. Time is the therapy. If this video gave you something concrete, something you'll act on, something you'll share with someone whose legs have been struggling, please consider subscribing. Every week I bring you this same quality of honest, specific, Evidence-based guidance with nothing to sell and nothing to hide. Next week, I'm going to cover the 5 specific leg symptoms that most people dismiss as normal aging, but that research identifies as early warning signs of peripheral arterial disease, requiring medical evaluation before they progress to something far more serious. Symptoms that recognized and acted on early completely change the outcome. You will want to know those signs. Until then, dress everything with the good oil, walk when you can, and give the most hard-working vessels in your body the compounds they were built to run on.